So one of the best performances this year comes from a dog. This is the Last Picture Show with A.Rahim Khan, and today I am reviewing Good Boy. Written and directed by Ben Leonberg. I think I didn't catch the trailer because you guys know I don't watch trailers, but I think I caught wind of this movie a couple of months ago where I read the plot outline, and at least on paper it's patently ridiculous. A horror movie told from the perspective of a dog. Now, this is not to say that you can't make a movie that is dog-centric, where the title character, or at least the lead, is a dog. But we haven't seen a horror movie starring a dog. Well, I mean, there was Kojo, if anyone remembers that, Stephen King's Kojo. But to have a movie made from a dog's perspective, or at least anything other than a human's perspective, is a tall order for the filmmakers and a potentially hard sell for the audiences. Of course, there are a lot of canine lovers out there, and I'm sure they would have turned out to this movie regardless of how good or bad it is. But for those of you, and now this is becoming a running theme in my shows, for those of you who don't want to sit through 10 or 15 minutes of me going on about how good this movie is, I will say yes, 100%. Not only is this believable, not only is this well executed, it has, as I said, one of the finest performances I've seen on screen this year, and that comes from a dog. It has shown, for I would say a first-time director, if I'm not mistaken, exceptional craft. And at that sweet spot of being right under an hour 30, it's actually, I think, an hour 12. This movie really, really did it for me. So if you were to ask, cinema, stream it, or skip it. Now, I'm not sure what kind of theatrical release this had, what kind of a cinema run this had. At least in these parts, we didn't get to see it. So if you can watch it in the cinema, most definitely do. Otherwise, stream it. I really, really like this movie. I like this movie for a number of reasons. Whether artistic or technical, the movie delivers perhaps on all fronts. As I said, if you are making a movie from the perspective of an animal, you're potentially setting yourself up for disaster, because this requires at least an exceptionally trained dog. And while we've seen like some fantastic performances, in the past, from pooches, from dogs of all sorts, trying to get them to emote, especially in a movie where it's not sort of like, the standard sort of like, excitement or anger or playfulness, those kind of three basic ones from a dog. In this one, you're supposed to get it to be scared. And it's not only scared for itself, it's scared for its owner, and then it's also scared for us, the audiences. So to do that and to sort of pull it off really, really speaks to Ben Leonberg's skill and ability and talent as a filmmaker. So a basic premise, the dog in this case is a golden retriever, I think I'm getting that right, named Indy, and his owner, suffers from a lung disease of some sort. And in order to get away from the city, he goes out to his family's rural house/cabin to get a breath of fresh air, literally. That's, of course, when things start to go bump in the night. And it's of course the dog Indy that starts to pick up on these strange, doings that go on, sort of like out of perhaps the perception of the human characters. And when we say that it's from the dog's perspective, the filmmaker is entirely faithful to that, to that thesis, to that idea, because we never very clearly get any of the humans in this. I mean, sure, they're of course a presence. We hear them a lot. There's a lot of sort of dialogue in that respect, but you never get like a clear shot of Indy's owner, or for example, his neighbor, or then sort of the owner's sister. It's always sort of a shot again from the dog's perspective. And to that effect, you have a lot of the shots at the dog's eye level, at sort of that. And I think that is so well done. Because the thing is, in this case, you've got to, sort of have the dog react to sort of a presence in the room. Typically, I mean, you could just have had sort of a camera placed in such a way where you are seeing the dog turn around. But in this case, it's at the dog's eye level. And so everything that happens is from that perspective. And I was genuinely wowed by how well it's done. And it's not just the technical feats of this movie that endeared it to me. There are genuinely scary moments. And there is genuinely, because I mean, sort of there are moments where I sort of had to put my hands up in front of my eyes. I always sort of watch horror movies like that. But then on top of that, it is able to build, again, I'm coming back to this thing, from a dog's perspective, a narrative where we even have sort of the dog dreaming. And it, of course, is dreaming. It's having, because now that it's sort of in the presence of this malevolent spirit, it's starting to get almost visions. And you would think that that's kind of stupid, that okay, I mean, sort of ordinarily the human character would be getting these visions or these premonitions of something to come. But in this case, it's the dog. But it's still, again, really neatly done. And then, of course, you tie up the story of this dog and its owner with that of the owner's grandfather and his dog. So there's this sort of almost generational thing going on here. This spirit that is literally bugging these people over generations, but it's also a burden, unfortunately, for these dogs to be carrying. And then the dogs' efforts to somehow save their owners. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that it's going to be, for me at least, the best horror film of this year, but something that I always argue, at least, or bring up when we speak about film, is that sort of, A, does it justify its existence, number one, and B, what is it sort of adding to cinema? On both accounts, I think Good Boy resoundingly justifies its existence, resoundingly justifies being a film, but then also it adds to cinema. I don't think we've seen a movie done like this before. And yes, there may be copycats to come. I think the only time that I've actually seen something like this was donkeys years ago. If you remember, there was this. It was from the creator of The Apprentice. I'm forgetting his name, Mark something. Him and I think it was Steven Spielberg. They did this reality TV show where they were supposed to find the next big filmmaker. And I remember one of the episodes had this guy doing a horror, short. Because that was the whole thing, that they were given a task for that particular episode. They had to come up with shorts. So I remember that particular one, he came up with a horror story, and in that it was from the perspective of a tree. It was a horror story from the perspective of a tree being cut down. And that's always stuck with me, I think almost now, 15 years or longer. And here we have that idea somewhat realized in Good Boy. So yes, catch this the minute you can. Really good movie.